morning. For generations, Michigan has been known for its superb colleges and universities. But what's the future of higher education in this state? Is it in jeopardy? Ask 10 people and you'll probably get 10 different answers. It's a big topic. We'll tackle it a little bit today from the perspective of three men who are not new to education, but they are the relatively new leaders of their respective institutions. Dr. Antoine Garibaldi of the University of Detroit Mercy, Dr. Juan Olivarez of Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, and Dr. George Eugene Ross of Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant. It's Sunday, March the 3rd. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Our premise today is higher education in Michigan. And where are we? Where are we going? Are we going forward? Are we going backwards? What should our priorities be? Starting from that big premise, Dr. Garibaldi, let me start with you. Where do you think we're at?
Well, I think we're at a point where many young people know that they have to get a college education in order to be successful in their respective careers. So we have a challenge of making sure that we can provide enough financial aid for students so that they can obtain a good education and also be able to pursue some of the careers that they're interested in. There have been articles recently which have questioned whether or not higher education is really worth it. But I think here in Michigan and in lots of places across the country, it's very, very clear that young people know that they must get a college education in order to be able to obtain a job, not just now, but also in the next several years.
Dr. Olivarez, and the good thing about the panel today is that it represents the city of Detroit. On this side of the state represents the middle of the state, and it represents the west side of the state. We are hearing from different corners of Michigan that while we have always prided ourselves on higher education in this state, and it's one of our great assets, that there might be some slippage because of the economic challenges, because we aren't graduating as many high school students. Your thoughts, are we?
Well, I think we're moving forward, definitely. I do think the challenge in higher education is probably like never before. I think, as has been noted, the issue of affordability is big in Michigan, as well as across the country.
Are we pricing students out of education?
Well, I think in some cases we are. I think we have to make higher ed accessible. And that's why we need all of our respective schools working together, but also looking at their strength within the state. We need the community college system. We need this flow through of our high school students going through higher ed. And I think it's critical for Michigan that we keep investing in our schools.
Dr. Ross, what should our priorities be as we move forward for the next decade, and how can we make education affordable for students today?
Well, I agree with my colleagues. Affordability, accessibility are two keys for our students in our state to be successful, but also for our state to be successful. The future of Michigan is tied to the future of higher education. We have read studies where there will be a need for over 1 million new jobs over the next decade, which will require college degrees. So our institutions have to be successful. As we move forward, from standpoint of a public university, I'm going to push and lobby the state to reinvest in higher education. Over this past decade, we've actually removed $1 billion from higher education funding at the state institutions. And the studies have shown that in communities and states where investments have been in higher education, those states and those communities do better economically. When you go to Lansing to try to make your case, are they hearing what you're saying, or are they so consumed with the overall challenges economically in this state that they feel like, you know what, we're doing the best we can and we can't do what we did 10 years ago? You know, I can't speak for specific legislators, but I do believe that the governor and the legislature understand the importance of higher education across our 3 schools, across the 15 publics, the 28 community colleges, the 20 private colleges in the state. there's a big challenge in Michigan across our economics, but we've got to find a way to make this a priority.
Dr. Garibaldi, Dr. Olivarez, you have private institutions. How is your challenge different than the public institution?
Well, our challenge is different because we don't get the same level of state support. Fortunately for us, we're able to put aside $47 million a year in institutional financial aid for our students, which helps to supplement the cost of their education. We also are fortunate that because 85% of our students at University of Detroit Mercy are from Michigan, many of those students qualify for Michigan tuition assistance grants. So that's about $1,500 to $1,600 a year. So that helps also to provide some costs and some support for that education. I think that between federal grants, state grants, and then the amount of monies that we put aside for institutional financial aid, which is about 30% of our budget annually, we're able to make the cost affordable for our students.
All right, I need to slip a commercial break in. When we come back from that commercial break, I will start back with you, Dr. Olivarez, and get your opinion.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back. We hope you stay with us. How are you all individually preparing students for this new economy, the jobs of the future that we're always hearing about? And that's always hard to predict because what's popular today, 10 years from now, may not be the hot job. Dr. Olivarez?
Well, we're paying very close attention to how the job market is changing. We keep a constant look at that with our Board of Trustees, with our faculty, and we are adjusting appropriately. We do believe that as a liberal arts school that we are providing the students what employers are saying they want in terms of the attributes of employees. At the same time, they want to make sure that they come out with some skills. And so I think one of our programs in sustainable business is really attempting to do that, being on the theoretical side, what it means, but also on the practical side with internships, a lot of practical experience. And so I think in today's world, employers are looking for those students who have had some hands-on experience.
Employers are looking for students who can learn. As you talk about jobs in the next 5 or 10 years, many of those we don't even know what they will be yet. So what we emphasize at Central Michigan is training students to be critical thinkers, training students to be analytical in their approach. Now, we produce engineers, we produce healthcare, we produce business graduates for the jobs of today, but many of the jobs of tomorrow, we don't even know what they will be yet. For instance, General Motors has probably been to our campus 8 times this semester alone, and what they say to us, they want students that are teachable, who write well, who communicate well, who have good quantitative reasoning and math skills, and they can train them for those jobs that don't exist yet. And that's what we're emphasizing at CMU, a total student with skills, but also with the ability to learn.
Is it more or less challenging to attract them to your campus, which is away from the big cities, but certainly a beautiful campus there too? Do you find that easier, harder these days?
You know, first of all, I agree with you. It is a beautiful campus. We actually have students from all 83 counties in the state of Michigan. And actually, our largest concentration of students are in Southeast Michigan, in the Tri-County area, our largest concentration of alumni. We've been very successful attracting students from all over the state and continue to be.
Dr. Garibaldi, I'll give you a chance to talk about how you're preparing your students for jobs of the future.
Well, sure. I agree with Dr. Ross and Olivarez. I think it's very important that students are able to transfer those skills into the changing occupations that they will experience over their lifetime. We've often heard that young people today and graduates today are going to have 7 different jobs by the time that they are into the later years of their career. We've been fortunate to have had co-op programs at the university for over 100 years. In fact, we celebrated that 100 years last year. But each different discipline, whether we're talking about business or architecture or the health professions, there's a slant to what we used to be taught. And I think that we have the challenge also of making sure that those students today, both students who are coming straight out of high school, as well as those students who are looking for different careers after having worked in one, that they have to know what some of those options are. And I'll give one quick example. Take, for example, architecture. Well, architecture has not been the most sought-after occupation over the last few years, in part because of the economy. But we have a very innovative program called Master of Community Development, which really focuses on how can individuals who have those skills make a significant impact on the communities. And we all know that there's a lot that we can do in Detroit and throughout the state. Many of those individuals have different kinds of current jobs, but having those additional skills will allow them to be able to transfer some of those skills into the workplace.
All right, I've got to get another commercial break in, but that's a good segue, because when I come back, I want to talk about how you're relating to the individual communities that you're in, whether it's Grand Rapids, the city of Detroit, or it's in Mount Pleasant. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm curious, what should be the relationship of a university to the community that they're in? And do you see that role changing these days, in these times, given the economic challenges that we face? Does it help? Does it hurt the institution? What are some innovative things that perhaps you are doing?
Well, we in West Michigan, first of all of the colleges and universities are partnering with our corporate leaders in the West Michigan area. And we get together, we have projects that we're working on. We keep a very good relationship to make sure that we understand the employer's needs, and that helps to translate what we need to be doing on our campuses. We are trying to collaborate more, and so that's one big way. Individually, Aquinas has a corporate partner program where we are interacting with our employers, trying to learn together, bringing in speakers. What does the future look like? What's the current state of affairs in our area, our region, our city? And beyond that, our students are very involved in our community. We have students in all kinds of service projects. It's very important, I think, for a college, university campus to be engaged in their community. Not only do we need their support, but it also helps us introduce higher education to the community, what it means, the value. They have to see us giving back, not just in our classrooms, but for the greater good. And so we're very involved and have been. Aquinas is 125 years old in Grand Rapids.
So you've been around for a little while.
So we've got a lot of roots there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Ross?
Well, you know, Chuck, you mentioned Mount Pleasant, and that's our home campus, but Central has physical locations throughout middle and northern Michigan. We teach in Grand Rapids, we teach around Detroit. We're about to open a Detroit Center in downtown Detroit. And we consider it a privilege to be in those communities, and we consider it a partnership. We do economic development through our Research Corporation. We're generating jobs, investments in Mount Pleasant. We're employing people through the corporations that we help get started. Our campus was founded over 120 years ago when there was a need for teachers in the state of Michigan. And we partnered with Michigan back in 1892 and forward to reduce teachers. Recently, our Board of Trustees approved the new College of Medicine for CMU. But it's not for CMU, it's for middle and northern Michigan to address the physician shortage in the state. And healthcare is critical to all of us as we move forward. Again, that partnership with the communities and our sense of responsibility for the state of Michigan and for our communities.
Dr. Garibaldi, I know that you've partnered with the city in trying to look at the future of what Detroit should be. How much of that can you take on when you're trying to also deal with preparing students for the future?
Well, we're taking on a lot, and I don't mean to one-up my colleagues here, but we're 136 years old.
I think you are trying to one-up them.
Okay. This goes back to the mission. And when the Jesuits began the University of Detroit in 1877, it had included in its mission a focus on urban. And so it's not accidental that all three of our campuses, law, dentistry, and the undergraduate and graduate colleges on McNichols campus, are in the city of Detroit and have remained there for all of those years. So when we talk about urban, we really are talking about neighborhoods and in communities. And we've taken on a lot because there's so much service learning that goes on in our respective schools and colleges. Our students through an Institute of Leadership and Service also are very actively involved. And we have been very actively involved with the city, with the state, and also looking at some federal opportunities, particularly in the McNichols-Livernois area, to try to strengthen that area. And we consider ourselves an anchor institution, and that's probably a label that others give us because of the fact that we've never left. And we really want to help to strengthen all of those neighborhoods and also use it as a laboratory for our students, irrespective of what their majors might be, so that they understand that there is an importance in terms of giving back. And our school of dentistry, for example, the majority of our students are involved in community dentistry, and they stay here in the state, and many of them don't ever leave. That we consider to be very important. But the town and gown relationship, as we all know, is something that people within our communities expect us to do. And so, working on McNichols and Livernois, and then also in Corktown, are two very, very important projects for us.
Okay. Two quick questions. I'll throw them out. We'll go to a commercial break and we'll come back and try to tackle them. Are there too many institutions of higher education in the state of Michigan, and what kind of partnerships are going on among the various colleges and universities? We'll be right back. And welcome back to Spotlight. All right, before we went to the break, I teased the question, are there too many institutions of higher education in the state of Michigan? Can we afford all these institutions that we have that have been a great selling point in the past, but should they be going forward?
I talk to colleagues all over the country, and I'm here to testify for them that the Michigan higher education system, whether public institutions or private institutions, are the envy of this country. I don't believe there are too many because, as I said earlier, the future of our state will be tied to the education level of our adult population in attracting businesses and retaining businesses. I think we have a responsibility as a state to make education a priority. The competition between institutions will decide whether we're meeting the needs of the families of this state. The notion that there are too many, I would argue we don't have enough college graduates in the state, and we need to meet that need for our state going forward.
Dr. Olivarez, we've always been a heavy manufacturing state. And some have said that has worked against us in terms of the type of jobs that we need to be preparing folks for the future. But is that working against keeping the number of institutions that we have?
No, I don't believe so. I think we have a good number of institutions. I think manufacturing has been very good for this state. Things are changing. Advanced manufacturing is certainly in the works for the more technical, high-level and manufacturing jobs that many of us are preparing students for in one way or another. And I think we have a good system in Michigan. I think the challenge is to keep them strong, to keep them relevant, to keep us partnering, to hold us accountable. And I think all those things we're going to be seeing in the future. But I think that manufacturing has been good for the state, and we are, I believe, moving, at least on the west side of the state, more and more towards the sciences, medical. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in Michigan. And I think there's a great effort around economic development that is moving towards those newer industries. But again, I think we're right on the cusp, and we should not tamper with trying to reduce our higher education system, but increasing it.
Dr. Garibaldi, your thoughts? And are our community colleges almost a threat to the four-year colleges, because population is certainly up among the two-year colleges?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to mention it as a part of our partnerships that we are involved in. Is we're working with community colleges to try to help those students at community colleges to transition into four-year institutions much better. Dr. Olivarez and I, we have a partnership between Aquinas with our nursing programs, for example, that's been underway for about 12 or 13 years. Every institution can't do everything. We all have different missions. We have to decide what are we good at and where can we serve this individual community in order to continue our own existence and to be viable. But there are large numbers of community college students who are looking for a four-year education. But many of them, either because of cost or time commitments, can only do it at a community college initially. So I've been having conversations with some of our local colleagues in order to make sure that we can provide that kind of assistance. And I think going forward, we will see that, just as Georgia said, we don't have enough college graduates within the state of Michigan. And as career fields change, we will have to adapt to that. And one example is no one ever heard the word cybersecurity 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's what a criminal justice or forensics or a biology or a chemistry major might be thinking about, as opposed to something much more simple as they did 12, 13 years ago.
Okay, time is my worst enemy. Very quickly before I go, Dr. Olivarez, Dr. Ross, is there anything else that you want to mention in terms of a key partnership that you feel the audience should know?
Well, at Central Michigan, we partner with our community college partners. About 30% of our entering class, 95% of our class comes from the state of Michigan, are transfers from community colleges. We've recently signed 5 reverse transfer agreements. We partner with Saginaw Valley, we partner with Ferris State, Michigan Tech, Michigan State. So those partnerships are there. Not on the educational side, but as we're being pushed to become more efficient in our operations, we're partnering on the business side also. We've had to do that. Again, we've lost half of our state funding over the last 10 years. We've had to become more efficient. It's through partnerships with other higher education institutions in Michigan that we've been able to do that.
All right, Dr. Olivarez, you get the quick final word.
Real quickly, I want to give accolades to UDM for our partnership with them with the nursing program. It's outstanding. I think it's a model, and we should do more of that.
All right, Dr. Garibaldi, Dr. Olivarez, Dr. Ross, thank you for joining us today on Spotlight, talking about the future of higher education in Michigan, and we'll check back in with you down the line.
Thank you, Chuck.
And we want to thank you at home for joining us. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.